I'm a small town guy. Life is an accident, panga le lo. Hey guys, I am CP Gurnani. I like to listen, but I also like to provoke.
So, Mr. Gurnani, opening question for today. So, what are two qualities that are underutilized or undervalued by leaders today?
The principle of leadership that I believe in is creating opportunities, creating a compelling reason for people to rally with you. People assume leadership is about the chair they will inherit. They forget leaders create their own space.
What do you think are the three biggest challenges that Indian leaders should solve for in the coming decade?
Our challenges, when you're in Delhi, you think top of the mind is climate. Number two, leadership will have to focus on strengthening the public health. The third part, in my opinion, is still education. I don't think education is that inclusive. The way the system is working today, only people who can afford coaching can go into IITs and IIMs. And I think we need to work on making sure education is all inclusive.
How are you measuring the CEO today on success parameters versus a decade ago?
My board, for example, debates not so much about strategy, it debates more about what is the purpose of the CEO and his leadership team. And the purpose is clearly about making an impact not only in the community but also in the state or in the country that we live in. Companies built with a purpose have always outlived any other company which is short-term focused on growth and profitability.
Data or instincts? What should a leader follow more and why?
I mean, I would use data but rely more on instincts, but that's me.
And how would you describe Mr. Gurnani's leadership style in three words?
Appreciation, gratitude, exponential thinking.
And the three things you could have imbibed more of as a leader?
When I look back as a leader, I should have learned to say no. I should have been less emotional about few of my decisions. Spent a little more time with my family.
Mr. Gurnani, you work on a range of social causes with your foundations and your NGO. What dimensions does this add to your leadership style?
I devote a fair amount of my personal time on skill upgradation or educational institutes. Social service cannot be about writing checks. It is about being involved, spending your most valuable resource, which is your time, and being able to make a difference.
What are the two most important traits or values that Mr. Anand Mahindra relies on you for?
I mean, you'll have to ask Anand that question, but I know that Anand's judgment about leadership is always about being values. And number two is how motivated you are to deliver results.
And what would be the three most important traits that Mr. Gurnani looks for in his leaders?
Initiative, positivity, teamwork.
How do you, Mr. Gurnani, encourage ideas and conflict of ideas in your workforce?
I think it's by design. You know, many things, most of us do it instinctively. We do it by design. So number one, shadow board. Shadow board is about listening to the youngsters. Average age of the company is 29. That shadow board of 29-year-olds, we listen to them. Number two is allow people to develop their skills. So we have a movement called Josh. The movement called Josh is all about individual skills. I love conflicts. I like to get a contrarian view. To me, a contrarian view only creates a little bit of positivity because sooner or later, we all want to be challenged.
And when you look back, Mr. Gurnani, what's the one biggest risk you've taken in your career that has paid off?
I have never taken a risk. The reason I call it a never taken a risk is it's always been a calculated decision. So for example, when I left HCL Group and joined Mahindra's, it was a calculated decision. You know, my wife had to leave the job, but it was a calculated risk and it's paid off. I mean, my career at Mahindra's has been good. Secondly, people talk about the risk of buying Satyam. I said, to me, it was not a risk, it was an execution. We took a calculated decision to buy Satyam, and we knew that good execution will make a huge difference.
So, Mr. Gurnani, you spoke about calculated decisions. The Mahindra Satyam merger was one of them. What's the one critical piece of that puzzle that needed to fall into place during the merger, and how did you go about achieving it?
The minority shareholders had lost a ton of money when the Satyam failure was announced. That means the board had a duty to repair Satyam sufficiently well so that the minority shareholder who had put their savings recover most of their sunken wealth. The Mahindra Satyam Tech Mahindra merger only happened after Satyam had become profitable and had mostly cleaned up all the legal disputes and all the disputes with the regulators around the world.
Two values of the Tech Mahindra culture that you're really proud of?
So number one is when I walk out and meet a customer and the customer lets me know that this individual or this group of people have done things beyond their call of duty. The second part is I come across examples of a Uber cab driver joining Tech Mahindra not as a driver but as a Python developer because one of my engineers spotted that boy having talent and gave him private lessons, and that Uber driver actually cleared all the exams and the interviews and has joined Tech Mahindra. That gives me more joy. If you look at the equation, ultimately it boils down to we making an impact, and that impact is being seen and felt.
And two values that you could infuse more of?
In today's environment of instant gratification, individuals tend to build their careers by switching jobs, switching cities. I think they need to learn a little more patience. And number two is 50 to 60% of people who are on the job are not spending enough time in self-learning or being relevant.
Three things that Mr. Gurnani does whilst giving feedback to his CXOs.
Number one is write down your short-term, medium-term and long-term goals. Number two is try and make your goals more public. And number three is work on yourself as much as you want to work on developing your team.
How do you conduct an effective meeting?
When I conduct a meeting, I expect the team members to come back and start the meeting not by trying to give me a new way to launch a spaceship, but to at least recap what the previous meeting was and what the actions proposed, have they been taken or not. Number two is I like to listen, but I also like to provoke.
What's the most brutal feedback you've received on your leadership? Who did it come from? What did they tell you?
It came from one of my colleagues. His point was very simple: appreciate in public, scold in private.
And what's the one most important thing you wish you knew more about leading people?
I never used psychological assessment tools, or I did not spend enough time when I was hiring people. I played a lot more on instinct, so that means I should have used data a little more.
Is there one failure that you look back on that has taught you something significant about human beings or people?
Sometimes not knowing the state of the mind of the individual. The guy could have had just shown his wife to the doctor. He still has come to office to work, but you just see him punching his clock at 12 o'clock and you start saying, is that a time to come to office? I mean, don't make instant decisions, and at least give yourself a little time to, pronounce a verdict, because you are at a situation where your words and statements can hurt people.
Mr. Gurnani, who do you think influenced your early thought process on leadership? And what is that one lesson that has stayed with you throughout your life?
My father, because he was a very, very honest government executive, he used to get transferred every year. And he taught me the world does not owe you anything. You need to make your place.
Who are some inspiring bosses that you worked for? What did they teach you?
Vineet Nayyar Senior. Vineet is humility. The business is not only about head and heart. It is also about head, heart and humor. Number 2 is Anand Mahindra. Anand Mahindra's values and purpose have always been the bigger driver. But the other 2 things that he has, in a way, taught me without really being explicit is take a bigger picture. Don't look at a immediate goal. And number 2 is exponential thinking.
Who in Business India is inspiring you right now?
You know, surprisingly, it's not business leader. To me, it is actually Prime Minister Modi. In terms of technology, which is my subject, I think it's for a change. Government is actually taking a bigger lead than anyone else. I mean, the point I'm trying to make is that there is a leader who is looking at a lot of forward calls, in a way, raising the standard. All these stories that you hear about UPI or Chandrayaan, I mean, I think they're all true because they are making India much better in physical infrastructure and much, much better in digital infrastructure.
Mr. Gurnani, who's somebody you've been really itching to meet? Who would it be and what would you ask them?
Aditya Puri. I first time met him and he said, I don't have a cell phone. I can't live without my cell phone for an hour. I mean, so how did Aditya Puri manage it? Number 2 is like an AM Naik. I mean, the reason is very simple that, he has more tablets for breakfast than I have parathas. At 82, 84, he's all there. I mean, he's still driven. Mukesh Ambani. When he thinks of Jio, think about it. Mr. Anil Ambani failed in the telecom venture and he creates one of the most successful ventures in... how does he get those calls?
It's rapid fire. The first thing that comes to your mind, enjoy it. The hardest thing about being a CEO is dash.
There's nothing hard about it.
One thing you've learned, always must do as a leader.
Be transparent, be honest. No, do not allow the second guessing.
70-hour work week in one sentence.
Tell me an athlete or a successful executive who has not worked 10 hours a day for 7 days.
Moonlighting in one word.
If you're talented enough to keep 2 bosses happy, best of luck.
One thing you wish people knew more about you.
The only thing I can tell you is that if I scold a person, I know that person loses his sleep for a day, but I lose the sleep for 2 days.
One thing in your job that you would think you could have got better at.
Taking forward calls about technology.
When in doubt, Mr. Gurnani dash.
Procrastinates.
Besides his family, Mr. Gurnani's most prized possession is?
An old chessboard that I used to play with when my father taught me.
Philanthropy discussions with Bill and Melinda Gates or chess tips from Vishwanathan Anand?
Bill Gates and Melinda.
Your favorite Mahindra holiday destination?
Asanora in Goa.
One thing on your personal to-do list that's been there for the longest time?
Take a trek to the Everest Base Camp.
The soundtrack to your life will be?
Pangalelo.
Besides at Tech Mahindra, 3 upcoming CEOs to watch out for.
Rajan Anandan is super leader. I think Anisha is doing a phenomenal job. Vineet Nayyar Jr., who was the CEO of HCL, is now running the Sampark Foundation.
Favorite book on leadership?
Extreme Ownership.
Anand Mahindra in one word.
Best human being I've ever met.
Your favorite movie or leader or character when we say the word leadership?
Chak De India.
Mahindra SUV, electric or Tesla?
Particularly since I know the Mahindra electric designs, Tesla has no chance.
What's the one-line joke you will leave on your successor's desk when you retire?
Don't blame me.
If you had a gigantic billboard and you had to put out a message to millions on your last day, what is that message that you would say and why?
Grateful.
What would Anita and Anand Mahindra, both your family and let's say your kids, agree with about you?
Probably say crazy.
With that, Mr. Gurnani, thank you so much. You've been such a sport.
Thank you, Qunba, for enabling these beautiful conversations.